Good evening, everybody. This is your favorite aspiring classicist here, a wandering author, reminding you that we're all the authors of our own lives. As always, my message remains the same. Spend less, live more, earn your freedom with frugality. And today, we're going to be going over Book 7, Chapter 3 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. This is easily one of the longest chapters that we've covered so far, and I will try my best to go through it at a decent pace. So let's get started here. He's talking again about self-restraint and unrestraint. Remember, Book 7 is all about vices, and he categorizes them into three: bestiality, which is people that behave like animals, not animal lovers. 2, unrestraint, and 3, vice in general, which covers a lot of different things. So now we're talking about unrestraint, and he opens the chapter by saying, we have then to consider first whether men fail in self-restraint, knowing what they do is wrong, or not knowing, and if knowing in what sense. 2, and next, what are to be set down as the objects with which self-restraint and unrestraint are concerned. I mean, are they concerned with pleasure and pain of all sorts, or only with certain special pleasures and pains? And then 3, is self-restraint the same as endurance, or distinct from it? So, those are going to be the 3 questions he's seeking to answer in this chapter. And so on with the other questions akin to this subject. The profligate yields to his appetites from choice, considering it right always to pursue the pleasure that it offers, whereas the man of defective self-restraint does not think so, but pursues it all the same. So the difference between a profligate, which is basically somebody that chases pleasure at all costs, a profligate wants to, and they choose to yield to their appetites. Someone with unrestraint, they don't want to. They know that pursuing pleasures at all costs is bad, but they do it anyways because they basically don't have the willpower. Now the suggestion that it is not knowledge but true opinion against which unrestrained men act is of no importance for our argument. Some men hold their opinions with absolute certainty and take them for positive knowledge. So that right there was one of the possible objections he brought up in the previous chapter. And instead of worrying about it, we're just going to toss it aside because opinion and knowledge kind of resemble each other. So that if weakness of conviction be the criterion for deciding that men who act against their conception of what is right must be said to opine rather than to know the right, there will really be no difference in this respect between opinion and knowledge. And that's just what I said, but in classic language. Aristotelian language. Since some men are just as firmly convinced of what they opine as others are of what they know. Witness Heraclitus. So that was a funny line, so let's repeat it. Since some men are just as firmly convinced of what they opine, meaning their opinions, they're just as convinced of their opinions as others are of what they know. So some people take opinions to be knowledge. But the word know is used in 2 senses. A man who has knowledge but is not exercising it is said to know, and so is a man who is actually exercising his knowledge. It will make a difference whether a man does wrong, but having the knowledge that it is wrong, but not consciously thinking of his knowledge, or with the knowledge consciously present to his mind. The latter would be felt to be surprising. But it is not surprising that a man should do what he knows to be wrong, if he is not conscious of the knowledge at the time. Again, reasoning on matters of conduct employs premises of 2 forms. Now it is quite possible for a man to act against knowledge when he knows both premises, but is only exercising his knowledge of the universal premise. Now remember I never covered the analytics, but in the book The Analytics, Aristotle goes over syllogisms, which is basically, if A plus B equals C, if A is equal to B and B is equal to C, then A is equal to C. It's a type of logical device. So he's talking about that here. And not of the particular, for action has to do with particular things. Moreover, there is a distinction as regards the universal term. One universal is predicated of the man himself, the other of the thing. For example, he may know and be conscious of the knowledge that dry food is good for every man, and that he himself is a man, or even that food of a certain kind is dry, but either not possess or not be actualizing the knowledge, whether the particular food before him is of food of that kind. So you might know that dry food is good for you, and you may even know that that food over there is dry, but if you're not exercising your knowledge, you're not going to put two and two together and realize that that means that food is good for you. Now, clearly the distinction between these two ways of knowing will make all the difference in the world. It will not seem at all strange that the unrestrained man should know in one way, but it would be astonishing if he knew in another. Again, it is possible for men to have knowledge in yet another way, besides those just discussed, for even in the state of having knowledge without exercising it, we can observe a distinction. A man may in a sense both have it and not have it. For instance, when he is asleep, or mad, or drunk, and he means mad as in angry. So we may know what's right or wrong, but if we're drunk, asleep, or if we're angry, then we might kind of basically forget about those things. But persons under the influence of a passion are in the same condition. For it is evident that anger, sexual desire, and certain other passions actually alter the state of the body, and in some cases even cause madness. So, let me repeat that for you. It is evident that anger, sexual desire, and certain other passions actually alter the state of the body, and in some cases even cause madness. So it might make you go crazy. Whenever you say that a girl is making you go crazy, you're being very literal. It is clear, therefore, that we must pronounce the unrestrained to have kingdom only in the same way as men who are asleep or mad or drunk. Their using the language of knowledge is no proof they possess it. So, in other words, a person of weak will can list off moral maxims and then yield to temptation a moment later. That's what an unrestrained person would do. They can act like they know what's right, but then their actual actions do not demonstrate they have knowledge at all. Persons in the states mentioned, meaning drunk, asleep, mad, repeat propositions of geometry and verses of Empedocles. Students who have just began a subject can reel off its formula, though they do not yet know their meaning. For knowledge has to become part of the tissue of the mind, and this takes time. You can't learn something instantly. It has to become part of the knowledge of tissue of the mind. Hence, we must conceive that men who fail in self-restraint talk in the same way as actors speaking a part. Again, one may study the cause of unrestraint scientifically. Thus, in a practical syllogism, the major premise is an opinion, while the minor premise deals with particular things, which are the province of perception. Now, when the two premises are combined, just as in theoretic reasoning, the mind is compelled to affirm the resulting conclusion. So in the case of practice premises, you are forced at once to do it. For example, given the premise, all sweet things ought to be tasted, and yonder thing is sweet, a particular instance of the general class, you are bound, if able and not prevented, immediately to taste the thing. And that makes sense. If all sweet things should be tasted, and that thing over there is sweet, then you bet your butt that I'm about to go taste that thing. When, therefore, there is present in the mind, on the one hand, a universal judgment forbidding you to taste, and on the other hand, a universal judgment saying all sweet things are pleasant, and a minor premise, yonder thing is sweet, and when desire is present at the same time, then though the formal universal judgment says avoid that thing, the desire leads you to it. So he's being very precise with his definition here of what unrestraint is. Thus, it comes about that when men fail in self-restraint, they act in a sense under the influence of a principle or opinion, but an opinion not in itself, but only accidentally opposed to the right principle. Hence, the lower animals cannot be called unrestrained, if only for the reason that they have no power of forming universal concepts, but only mental images and memories of particular things. That's right. I mean, unrestraint is kind of like undisciplined, and we do not call animals undisciplined. Well, sometimes we do, if it's a dog. If we ask how the unrestrained man's ignorance is dissipated and he returns to a state of knowledge, the explanation is the same in the case of drunkenness and sleep, and is not peculiar to failure of self-restraint. We must go for it to physiology. But inasmuch as the last premise, which originates action, is an opinion to some object of sense, and it is this opinion which the unrestrained man, when under the influence of passion, either does not possess, or only possesses in a way which, as we saw, does not amount to knowing, it but only makes him repeat it, as the drunken man repeats the maxim of Empedocles. And since the ultimate term is not a universal, and is not deemed to be an object of scientific knowledge in the same way as a universal term is, we do not seem to be led to the conclusion which Socrates sought to establish, which is the opinion that Socrates sought to establish was that if you know, you never act contrary to your knowledge. So like if you know what is right and what is wrong, Socrates believed that you would never act against that knowledge. Aristotle says that we do act against that knowledge sometimes, and personally I think Aristotle's point of view makes a lot more sense. For the knowledge which is present when failure of self-restraint occurs is not what is held to be knowledge in the true sense, nor is true knowledge which is dragged about by passion, but knowledge derived from sense perception. So much for the question whether failure of self-restraint can go with knowledge or not, and with knowledge in what sense. So, you can fail in self-restraint, and you can possess knowledge of it beforehand. There's basically the conclusion of chapter 3. So, thank y'all for watching. If you enjoyed this, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Take some effort to do this. I copy everything from these books down by hand because I want to learn it. So I highly recommend that to you guys. If you really want to learn some ancient philosophy, hand copy the works of Aristotle by hand, or whatever is your philosopher of choice. Anyways, like, share, and subscribe. What are y'all doing in order to inspire, uplift, and empower your local community today? Because this world isn't changing unless we all do our part, and you can count on me to do mine daily. Until next time, I love y'all.